Thank you very much, Peter, for the kind words and the introduction. And thank you all for being here, both those of you who have come this evening and especially to the people who have pitched. We've had a bit of a sneak preview, actually, this afternoon. I can tell you you're definitely in for a treat as to what you're going to find, what you're going to hear about this evening. Now, I've kind of detected a little bit of a standard format for these kind of events, which is that the speaker at the beginning engages in what I call a little bit of kind of shock and awe statistics, where I kind of tell you about how damaged the world really is, just to kind of get you to kind of sit up and pay attention. And in fact, I think that happens so much these days that I'm not sure it really has the desired effect anymore. So I thought we might just kind of turn that on its head a little bit, and I'm going to try and crowdsource that a little bit from you. So I don't know, anyone want to shout out their kind of their favorite statistic or their favorite fact which they think maybe portrays, the kind of state of the world? Could be good or could be bad, by the way. Could go either way. I'm sure we've got lots of experts in the room who know a lot about this kind of stuff.
2 degrees.
2 degrees, yeah. Temperature and how we're doing against that with Paris and all the rest of it, yeah. So there's the whole climate change thing. What else? 10 billion people by 2050, yes. And there was a hand over here.
93% of European venture capital money in 2018 went to all-male founding teams.
95%? 93% of European venture investments went to all-male founder teams. Right, okay, that's a pretty stark one, okay. Anything else? Yes, please.
1 in 7 people that qualify as disabled in the world.
1 in 7 people in the world qualifies as disabled. That's a huge number, isn't it? Yeah. And just ahead of you, did you put your hand up again? Yeah.
Let me say something positive. We moved over I can't remember, but over 1 billion people out of poverty in the last 2 decades.
Yes, indeed. 1 billion people out of poverty in the last 2 decades. Great. Well, so there's a lot of these statistics, and we're all kind of familiar with them, and we all get bombarded with them on an almost daily basis. And for me, the critical insight on a lot of these things, actually both the positive and the negative, is that a root cause of all of these is actually how we choose to run our economy. And I use that word choose very deliberately, because actually we do choose how we run our economy. I think of the economy as being essentially how we produce all the services and goods that we all need to live. Very simply, be they paid or unpaid services or goods, perhaps whether they happen kind of in a marketplace or in the household or whatever. And obviously, if we want to create an economy that really works, we need to be able to create all the services and goods that everyone needs to be able to live a kind of dignified life on this planet. And we need to be able to do that within the constrictions and the bounds of this planet that we live on. I mean, that's hopefully not too big a leap for everyone to make. So just so that we can think a little bit differently for a minute about the economy and how that works, I'd like you to kind of indulge me for a minute or two and just do a little thought experiment with me. Imagine that your body represents an economy. Yeah, so we're kind of an economy here. I've got trillions of cells in my body. The cells represent organizations. The organizations are creating services and products. They're exchanging those with each other. We've got raw materials pumping up and down our kind of bloodstream, be that sugars, be those proteins, be those hormones, whatever. So, kind of whole functioning body. Now, I think if we were to kind of analyze our bodies and have a look around our kind of bodies that represent this economy, we would find that actually we're looking pretty ill, frankly. And in fact, if we looked a little bit more closely, I think the main thing that we get quite worried about is frankly, we're kind of suffering with quite a lot of cancer. And I say that for 3 reasons at the moment. The first is we have a lot of cells in our body that are essentially growing for growth's sake. Yeah, they're just trying to get as big as they possibly can. And that's what we call a tumor. Yeah, in biology, that's called a tumor. Secondly, these tumors are sucking in a disproportionate amount of resources. It's called angiogenesis in medical terms. They're sucking in resources from all parts of the body, and there's bits of the body that actually are not getting what they need anymore. And thirdly, these tumors are starting to metastasize. They're spreading to all kinds of parts of the body, which previously actually were perfectly healthy, and now are essentially getting infected with this as well. So I realize that's a little bit of a downer, but I do think it can be instructive as well. Because if we think further about the metaphor, and by the way, I'll let you think further on about how that works, but there's lots and lots of more parallels that you can make between our economy and how cancer works. But one of the important things is that we know what the root cause of cancer is. Yeah, the root cause of cancer are essentially gene mutations, mutations that happen in our DNA. And and these gene mutations, actually, we have thousands of those going on in our bodies all the time, every day. And the vast majority of them make no difference whatsoever. They're completely harmless. A few of them might even be beneficial, you never know. But every now and again, you get a gene mutation that's unhelpful. And over time, these kind of pile up. And over time, that's essentially how cancer, through lots and lots of little mutations that happen, will occur. Now, the question for me is, in our economy, what's the equivalent of gene mutations? What's the equivalent of these genes? And for me, it's actually it's fairly obvious. It's the fundamental kind of values that we all use that we collectively believe in, and that we collectively, unconsciously or not, and often in a very unexamined way, by which we run our economy and we run our society. And like our genes, these have been mutating for hundreds of years. And these kind of little changes happen all the time, and some of them are useful and some of them are less useful. Let me give you an example of what I think one of our gene mutations is in our economy. So, for hundreds of years, economists used to have this kind of very rigorous debate and vigorous debate about what is value. What constitutes economic value and how does it get created? And this is kind of, over hundreds of years, this kind of followed a little bit how the economy works. So, it used to be the case that people would say, well, it's all about trade in kind of, mercantilist times. Then, at some point, actually, it's all about land. And then maybe in the Industrial Revolution, we kind of get to the point where it's all about labor. Maybe more recently, we say, well, actually, it's not labor, it's all about technology, and it's all about innovation. What's actually really interesting, and in a way, I would say the mutation that's happened maybe in the last kind of 50, 70 years, is that actually that whole debate has gone away. Because what happened at one point is they said, actually, you know what, we don't need to have this debate because we're just going to say, we just think that actually value is expressed by price. Economic value pretty much equals price. Yeah? Now that, I actually believe is well, it's interesting and it's possibly interesting as well. Because for one thing, I'm not sure that price genuinely expresses value in all situations. I think there's lots of situations where I would say, well, I'm not sure that price really expresses the value that I think is inherent here. But the second and slightly perfidious thing is that what's happened is that the debate has gone away. We no longer have a debate as to what value is in economics. It's just taught in Economics 101, price equals value, and then we move on, and we just take that as an axiom. So that's just to give you a flavor of that's quite a long-term kind of genetic mutation, if you like, that's happened in our collective values. But that kind of stuff happens in all kinds of situations, in all kinds of ways. And I'm sure you can think of many more examples as well. So the question then for me becomes, how do we heal our economy? How do we make our economy healthy again? How do we cure ourselves of this cancerous behavior? And that's actually where I think this evening kind of plays a part. And interestingly, I think it plays a part in a couple of different ways. One is, obviously the people who are pitching today and the organizations that are pitching are actually hopefully pitching services and products that are part of what I would call an economy that works for all. They're hopefully part of the pitching services and products that we need, that are not currently being met, and that have a social or environmental value to them. And that's kind of level one, and that's already fantastic and already very helpful. But I actually think that's not going to be enough to heal our economy. And I think there is a second thing going on this evening, which to me is almost more exciting. And that is, as well as pitching their actual service, we can also think about it this way. These entrepreneurs have all thought of, how can I run or found and scale an organization that conforms essentially to a slightly different set of values, that does things slightly differently. If you like, what they've done is they have genetically engineered their organizations to be, in my book, I'd say one of these little genetic mutations. It's kind of a little experiment that's happened. And the exciting thing about that is that those mutations can actually kind of spread outside of their own organizations that they're running as well. Now, you might say, you know what, that kind of feels like a really slow way of trying to make any change happen. It's very intangible. We've only got 12 years to kind of make a real dent on climate change, according to the IPCC. How's this going to work? But let me throw you some examples. If you think about what's happened with the plastics revolution and how quickly how mainstream that has gone in an incredibly short amount of time. Or similarly, if you think about veganism, veganism in the UK, the number of vegans in the UK has quadrupled between 2014 and 2018. Or even if you think about the impact investing industry globally, the assets under management have increased tenfold in that same 2014 to 2018 period. So it is actually possible that these kind of values changes, which I think all of those things represent, can happen really quickly if they're kind of in the right context, the right people are getting hold of them, and enough people talk about them. So we're basically kind of, I think, talking at two levels. We've got the primary level this evening of what are the goods and services that are actually being created by these organizations and how exciting those are. But secondly, there's a kind of an effect of this, if you like, infection with a different way of doing things and a different way, different set of values of having. And I think if we want to save our economy and we want to heal our economy, we need a whole bunch of those. We need, I think, to address that, if you like, genetic level. I think we need to change our fundamental values. I don't think it's going to happen if we just try and patch it up with more and different goods and services. I think we need to be quite clear about that. Secondly, though, I think it is possible to do this quite quickly, as we can see from those couple of examples that I just mentioned. And it can happen more quickly than you think. And we can create that tipping point, if you like. And thirdly, and this is the important bit, the way that these values mutations, if you like, spread is through people. Yeah? And this is where actually all of you come in. This is why these kind of events are so exciting, because the way these guys have impact is not just through what they do and the organizations they run, but also through the people they talk to. And these spreads by you taking this into your workplaces and talking to your colleagues and your friends and family about that as well. Now, you might feel that, you know, it's only me against the whole economy. What kind of dent am I going to make? And frankly, it's going to take a little bit of a miracle for us to kind of, you know, get this economy turned around. But when it comes to miracles, I quite like to quote an American philosopher called Charles Eisenstein, who says, we need to make miracles happen. Miracles are not the intervention of a divine power in the contradiction of the laws of physics. Miracles are purely something that was not possible in an old story and is possible in a new story. So what I think we all collectively need to do is go out and find those mutations, find those genes that are going to make up the new story that we want to tell, and then all of us need to go out there and infect the world. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you for being here. Good luck to everyone who's going to pitch, and I know you're going to have a fabulous evening. Thank you.